Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again on GBN Originals. My guest today is Kevork Almassian, an award-winning journalist from Syria, born and raised in Syria, although he hasn't been living there for a number of years now for reasons that are probably quite understandable to any of you who've been paying attention in recent times. We've spoken before, Kevork and I, about the events that unfolded in his homeland from 2011, let's say, and the outbreak of international efforts to oust President Bashar al-Assad. That came to a conclusion last year, at the end of last year. But obviously, events have taken an extremely ugly and sinister turn in the last few days. And so I thought it highly urgent to reconnect with Kevork. Thanks for joining me, Kevork, even though under these dreadful circumstances in your homeland.
Thank you very much, Neil, for having me. This is an opportunity also to inform your respected audience about what's going on in Syria. I'm sure many of them are already on X and other social media platforms and they can see, but if you watch the mainstream press, I don't find much of noise about what's going on there or pushback in order to stop the atrocities.
First of all, give us first of all your understanding of what's happening in Syria now and the scale of it.
So if we want to understand what's going on today, we have to understand what happened on the first day when the insurgency started. When the insurgency started, the militants who carried out arms, they were chanting in public and saying, "The Christians to Beirut and the Alawites to the grave." And this was a very famous logo and slogan they raised at the beginning, which means the Christians should go to Lebanon and the Alawites should be killed, basically. And this is the prophecy they're trying to implement at the current moment, which means that the ethnic and religious minorities are coming under brutal repression and massacres by the Julani government. The reason for it is because in their mind, since President Assad, the former president of Syria, was from an Alawite sect, they understood this conflict as sectarian. So in their mind, if the president is an Alawite, this means a person who belongs to a minority sect has ruled Syria for over a long time, which means now it's their time to rule over the country and persecute basically the Alawites because they belong to the same sect as the former president of Syria, although the president left and escaped to Moscow and he left all these Alawites for their fate. Now, there is a lot of media manipulation in the past years trying to portray like the Alawites are the Assad stronghold. Like they are the grassroots supporters of Assad and that they're benefiting from the Assad regime somehow. And I would like to clarify this, that in Syria under Assad, there was a political authoritarianism, which means if you're a Christian, if you are an Alawite, if you are a Sunni, if you are anything, a Jew, and you oppose the regime politically enough, you could end up in jail. So the persecution was based on politics. There was no discrimination against the people based on their beliefs or religions. But the other side, the opposition and the media behind them, they have portrayed the Assad regime as sectarian Alawite regime. Therefore, now they are taking revenge against not only Assad, but the popular base of Assad that they believed was one of the foundations of the former regime. So they are on a spree of free killing, basically. They're taking people out of their homes. First, they are humiliating them and then killing them. And if you watch the footage, it seems that they are enjoying the killing. This is not only about killing, but also the pleasure, because in their mind, they're taking revenge from these people. But what they're basically doing, they're killing civilians. Like they're killing entire families and wiping them out. Yesterday, a member of the European Parliament from Greece, I apologize that I forget names sometimes, but he was in Syria during this genocide, and he said that the reliable estimates are over 7,000 deaths among the Alawites and the Christians in a matter of 3 days. This means that the daily killings are over 450 deaths per day. And as you may know, I'm an ethnic Armenian, and under the Armenian genocide, the number of casualties among the Armenians was 400 per day for a long period of time. And now this is even more than what happened to the Christians and the Armenians under the Ottoman Empire, unless, of course, they would be in international protection or try to stop these massacres. It seems Russia and the US are on the same side on this. Trump and Putin, they're coordinating on this. And according to to Russian sources, they say that they are preparing for a mini state for the Alawites in the coastal side of Syria in order to separate them from the rest of the country.
How prior to recent events, in the immediate aftermath of the fall of Bashar al-Assad, how small were these minorities in the total number of the population of Syria? What proportion, let's say, was Alawite? What proportion was Christian? What proportion was Druze?
Actually, the Alawites were around 3 million Syrians, between 2 to 3 million Syrians, so they were over 20% of the Syrian society. The Druze are, the Christians were 1.5 million before the war. After the war, 80% of them have fled the country. And there were also so many facilities for the Christians to leave Syria. Like the NGOs used to give lots of resettlement programs for the Christians to leave the country, unlike the Alawites, for example. And the Druze are also a very small minority. In this case, we have to understand what is the end goal for the regime change. Now, when Turkey and Israel sensed that Trump is coming to power, this was a few weeks before Trump arrived to the White House and before he even emerged victorious. But all the polls, like back then, have shown that Trump is going to win. And Turkey and Israel didn't like the idea of Trump that he would withdraw American forces from Syria. So they accelerated the regime change. They have collaborated together in order to knock out Assad from power, basically, Israel and Turkey together. But for Turkey, this was the end goal, like kicking Assad out and having an influence over Syria, taking over the coastal line of Syria where there are gas fields, for example, building military installations and installing a puppet for Turkey in Damascus. Those are amazing news because Erdogan says that he is a neo-Ottoman person and he wants to expand his influence in the region. But for Israel, that wasn't the end goal. Like knocking Assad out was one stage before other stages that Israel wants to implement, one of which is what is called the Yunon Plan. The Yunon Plan, which Israelis have adopted 20, 30 years ago, and they call for the Balkanization of the region. First, destroy the national armies, and then divide the countries into different mini-states. So this is what they tried to do in Iraq. They have destroyed the army, and then divided Iraq into 3 regions, Shiites, Sunnite, and Kurds. And this is the same in Syria, that they want to Balkanize the country and divide it into 4 or 5 regions. So we have the Druze would have their own mini-state and open corridor with Israel through the Golan Heights. That's why Israel is imposing a non-militarized zone in southern Syria, because they want to have this corridor with the Druze. And then we have the Kurds on the eastern shore of the Euphrates under the protection of the Americans. And then you have the Christians and the Alawites, who would probably live together in the coastal line. But Israel doesn't have geographical, let's say, a proximity or connectivity with the Syrian coast. There is Lebanon between them, unlike southern Syria. So here Israel went to Russia and said that this should be a Russian under Russian protection, and Greece and Cyprus could participate in this, and everyone has a mutual interest here to minimize the Turkish influence in Syria by keeping them out of the vital places, for example, the coast, where there are lots of gas in the Mediterranean. Greece would not be happy about it, that Turkey would take over the Syrian gas. Cyprus would not be happy, and Israel would not be happy, and Russia would not be happy. So there is a mutual interest here between these countries to kick the Turkish influence out of this region by giving the Alawites a mini state, which is, in my opinion, look, I'm not here to now say what the people should call for or how should they feel, because if there is someone outside your door and holding a gun to your head, you would probably want to have your mini state, right? And be separated, I understand. But I'm a geopolitical analyst, and I find that disastrous for the nationhood of Syria, because now we are already partitioning what has been already partitioned. Syria is a product of Sykes-Picot Agreement 110 years ago between the French and the Brits. They have divided this region. There were no borders between them, but they divided it into spheres of influence. And this has been the divide and conquer strategy. Now they're dividing what is already been divided in the past, which means the region will be more disintegrated and weaker, and it will be difficult for them to have more economic integration for an independent, let's say, development of the region. So now all these mini-states are dependent on outside forces instead of having a national unity and a national economy which they can rely on to build their future and their prosperity.
What is the objective of the slaughter? You invoked the word, the genocide word. In amongst all of this politicking, geopoliticking, what is the objective of the ultra-violence?
It's the subjugation of the Alawites, because in their mind, the Alawites represent a threat in the future, that they are a moderate sect in Islam, and they are highly educated, and they could pose a political threat against the Julani regime in the future if they come together and form a political party or a political force once again. And he wanted to teach them a lesson now that in the future, if they think of rising against the Julani regime, this is what's going to be the result of it. It's going to be massacres. Now, when we watch and listen to the officers of Julani, like, the most absurd and troubling part of it is that they're documenting everything, and they're posting themselves all these videos on social media platforms because they want for the people to see what they're capable of doing. Now, Julani issued an order saying that recording is banned, after we have seen all these videos, but everybody is recording itself, and they're talking about ethnically cleansing the Alawites from the coast. They say that they have the intention to commit genocide against the Alawites if they don't behave, which means this is about subjugation and sending them under the bus, basically, so that they could be forced to be loyal to the Julani regime, something that is very, it's impossible for the Alawites to live under such a rule. I have lived in Syria for a long time, Neil, and the Alawites, when we used to go to the coastal cities, the Alawites are very, let's say, open-minded. They don't, they are on the coast, so they have lots of tourist interaction, and they're very, their women are very liberal, for example. And there were also lots of intermarriage between the Christians and the Alawites. This wasn't something that was a taboo among the Alawites. So there was this harmonic relationship between the Christians and the Alawites. So in the mind of Julani, Christians and the Alawites, which probably represent 30% of the Syrian people or 25%, they could in the future pose a new threat against his rule and bring someone from these communities, someone like Bashar, which I'm sure he is now rejected from the most of the Syrian people in the country. But if someone rises and comes as a, let's say, military figure in the future, a political figure to unite the country again from these communities, they're making sure that they would be subjugated, and in their conscious and subconscious would remember that this is going to be the result if they challenge the authority in the country.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private internet access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cybercriminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private internet access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Is there any difference, would you say, in the violence that's being meted out to Alawites and the violence that's being meted out to Christians, or is it indiscriminate in that respect?
Now, the prejudice against the Alawites is much higher and more brutal, because in the mind of the Julani people, in the books that they believe in, Christians are they say that the Christians are still the people of the book, which means that they still believe in God. But the Alawites, in their mind, they are heretics, complete heretics, because they don't only believe in the Quran, but also there are other philosophical teachings that they believe in from other civilizations, which gives them a different perspective for life, right? So in their eyes, the Alawites and the Shiites are the worst of the worst. This is in their minds. And they say fighting against the Alawites and the Shiites is more important than fighting against the Christians and the Jews. This has been repeated a lot nowadays in these videos that I've seen about these massacres. Now, during the massacres, Latakia, Tartus, Homs, Hama, Jable, and all these cities are mixed cities, Neil. They are mixed between Alawites, Sunnis, Shiites, and Christians. So I will give you a few examples. Like, they go into a neighborhood, they think this is an Alawite neighborhood. So they're killing everyone in the neighborhood, but there are Christians there, there are Armenians there, they're also getting killed. Now, they stormed into an apartment. I've seen a video, and they saw the St. Mary's picture on the wall, and they have destroyed it, and they have killed the people who were inside. So they're, of course, killing the Christians also en masse in the discourse of this genocide against the Alawites. But there's also something very important, and this is a story I received from my friend in one of the coastal cities, and I spoke to her. She and her mother and her father, they escaped their small house because these multinational terrorists came and they were executing everyone in the street, and they went to the farms and they tried to hide in the farms. And there was a family from a neighboring village, which was from the Sunni family, and they hosted them in their home and they protected them so that these jihadists, if they come, they wouldn't kill them. And this type of stories I heard a lot during the Armenian genocide, that I met with Muslim Syrian Sunnis who told me their grandmother or grandfather was Armenian. How could that be? They're Muslims, but because back then when the Armenian genocide survivors arrived to Syria and they were very young, they protected them and they adopted them into their families. So they became part of this family in order to protect them against the genocide. And similar things are happening. So if they find a Sunni family who is protecting any Alawite or Christians, they're killing them as well. And this is an example that I've seen with names and family names and surnames that many people who belong to the Sunni sects were executed because they protected a Christian or an Alawite in their home.
And that's part also of your family story, isn't it? You know, your family came out of during that Armenian genocide, and as you describe in the case of others, they were welcomed into the Muslim world in Syria.
Neil, when you watch this footage, now you know how the Armenian genocide happened. 110 years ago, people said, how could it be 1.5 million people were perished? And this is how. It's from home to home. And this is a typical Ottoman approach, which they implemented 110 years ago. And now New Ottoman Erdogan is the main mastermind behind this genocide against the Alawites. If, not even Erdogan, Neil, the most junior official in Turkey, if he picks up the phone now and calls al-Julani, all these massacres stop now. But they won't do it. They won't do it because the Alawites in the Syrian coast, they reject this Ottoman rule in Syria, and they know about it. So all this talk about now, if you watch mainstream, the European Union statement, Neil, it's disgusting beyond belief. The European Union, they have said that the atrocities now in Syria are happen due to what is called Assad regime remnants. This is what the EU is blaming. They're blaming the victims for getting killed. Who are the Assad regime remnants in their eyes? So any military fighting age person in the coast who used to be in the past from the Syrian army, and we have to understand the Syrian army was a service. You go to serve your country, which means every man served in the military. So every fighting age male in the coastal parts is called Assad regime remnant, that they're somehow loyal to Assad. But I can assure you, if Assad returns tomorrow to Syria, he would get killed by the same people that they're calling them Assad regime remnants today, because in their eyes, Assad fled the country and he betrayed his soldiers. This is how the soldier mentality is. But they're trying to present this smoke screen that there is this somehow Assad regime remnants in the coast, and the Julani regime has to go and crush them in order to stabilize the country. But I've posted probably hundreds of videos since a week on my X account. I haven't seen one of them killing a militant, a soldier. They're all unarmed civilians. They're executing them, but they're men. If he is a military age man, if he's between 18 to 45 years old, you would execute everyone and call them an Assad regime remnant. So the media is definitely complicit in this. And not only the media, Neil, I would like to mention one more thing, because I'm coming now under a serious and brutal attack by the so-called liberals in the UK. And the liberals in the UK, they have whitewashed this so-called revolution in Syria, and they have whitewashed all these insurgencies. They have said that this is a democratic revolution, and those are moderate rebels, and those are democratic fighters fighting for freedom and human rights. This is what they sold to the people. And they have shaped the narrative in the UK, and this narrative is now killing people in Syria. And when I pointed out this on X, now my account comes under attack for pointing that out. And now we are called Assadists again for pointing out the obvious, because we warned this. We said, if Assad is gone and there is chaos and the military is destroyed, this is an inevitable outcome. Like the self-appointed president of Syria is Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who in 2003 went to Iraq and joined al-QAEDA and sent car bombs to the Shia neighborhoods in order to start a civil war. Even Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, who was the head of al-QAEDA back then, used to tell him, what are you doing? Why are you killing Iraqi Shias? Like, there are American occupation forces in Iraq, but you're sending car bombs into civilian neighborhoods and killing people. And he ended up in a CIA-operated prison in Iraq alongside Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And in 2011, they have both left the prison miraculously, and they were released. And one of them formed ISIS, and Julani was his partner, basically. And then they had political disagreements over authority and power, and they have split. One stayed in ISIS, and the other one became the leader of the al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria, al-Nusra Front. So we are talking about someone who is a takfiri. He is very radical, and he cannot build a state. He can destroy a state, but someone like him, he cannot build a state. And the people in Syria know it. And the majority are scared of this regime. Therefore, they choose to stay silent, right?
So how do you interpret, for example, just days before all of this started to happen, the UK government, under the aegis of Foreign Secretary David Lammy, sent £50 million notionally to support an inclusive government in Syria. I look on at that and find it simply incomprehensible. I don't know how anyone arrives in a position where they think that you can say that with a straight face, so to speak.
So here are the numbers, Neil. Germany sent 50 million euros after the regime change. Switzerland sent 65 million. The UK sent 60 million. The EU sent 235 million. And before that, we had the USAID, NED, and other Soros organizations. They have funneled billions of dollars into one small region in Syria where al-Julani used to occupy. Julani, before this regime change, he used to occupy probably 10%, 8% of the Syrian territories. And this is where they send all these billions. Although the Pentagon said that this region is the largest safe haven for al-Qaeda terrorists since 9/11. This was an official classification by the Pentagon, and they sent all these billions there. And then when Trump stopped the funding and they started to look into the numbers and the data, where is this money going to? They found horrendous things. Like, they sent billions to this small region. They say this is for humanitarian aid. And it goes to humanitarian NGOs. But who established these humanitarian NGOs? Who is their handler in the US and in the UK? They're all part of this mafia of the foreign aid people, which they invest, it's true, they invest in humanitarian aid. They build tents for people to live in a miserable way. They give them water, they give them food, but there are also millions of it. It's going to the pockets of the officers and the commanders of Julani's army. And there was an example of an NGO in Syria where somebody established an NGO and said this is a humanitarian organization, and he received money from the USAID, and then he redirected this money into the pocket of the officers and the commanders of Julani's army. And this has been exposed, and Trump administration showed it to the people. So of course they have, if the 90% of Syria or 80% of Syria, which was under the control of Assad, was under harsh sanctions, you can't buy, you can't sell your oil, you can't buy medical products, you can't do transactions, your central bank is sanctioned, your assets are frozen, you have no money basically. So the people who lived under Assad were starving. But the people who were living under Julani, they received all these billions. So they enabled this region economically to tell the people that this is the example if you get rid of Assad. But this was all artificial because it's a flow of money without an industrial base. Like, if you want to feed your people, you need your functional economy, not foreign aid coming all the time. And this is a failed, in my opinion, a model if you want to manage the state affairs. But now entire Syria has become like this. It just depends on foreign aid, and all these corporations are coming to suck whatever is left in the country from gas, from phosphate, from any earth minerals and oil, etc. And the Syrians own basically nothing now.
When to broaden it out into the wider world and the wider set of narratives, on the one hand, we've got what's happened in Romania. You know, a presidential election that's just been cancelled because it was going, in inverted commas, the wrong way for the powers that be. In Ukraine, we listen and have listened for years to this litany about it being about the defence of democracy on the same continent in which we watch what has just happened in Romania, which is clearly the subversion of any notion of respecting the will of the people, as made manifest by a democratic process, and also in the same world in which we're being invited to look on at Ukraine, defence of democracy, that Europe and the EUs are some sort of bastions of democracy. And yet money's being sent at the same time, and we can all see it at the same time, into Syria, for example, to do the things that you've just described. And I suppose what I don't understand is why the powers that be pulling all of the strings, they seem quite confident in taking for granted that many of us can see the duplicity and that it doesn't matter. And I wonder, at what point do enough people looking on draw the necessary conclusion that we live in a post-truth, post-democratic world where it's blatant lawlessness by powerful people and the blatant disregard of international law, democratic process, even straightforward lawfulness. When do people look on and see all of these stories can't be playing out the way they are all at the same time in a lawful world?
Neil, what is democracy? Democracy is to elect a government which is of the people, by the people, for the people. Like it's at the end of the day, democracy should serve the interests of the people. And you have deconstructed this in a perfect manner, how the governments and the politicians who claim to serve the people are basically serving the interests of the business class, of the pharmaceutical industries, etc., etc., etc. But when there is a candidate or there is a political party which is probably seeing through this, or some of the talking points serve the interests of the people, this party, this candidate, whoever is this person, they come under scrutiny, they come under attack, and even the delegitimization. Like they try to ban political parties in Europe. Like they try to ban the AfD in Germany. And the AfD is a right-wing populist party, right? And they say things that I find quite logical when it comes to certain topics. And that's why they attack them. And there are other topics I completely disagree with them, right? But because we don't live in a democratic environment any longer, everybody has to agree on the major headlines that they're trying to impose on the people. Therefore, these smear campaigns is not only exclusive against the political, let's say, figures who are pushing against this type of tyrannies, but also against journalists, against activists, against influencers on social media platform. When I mentioned you the smear campaigns against me during this conversation, this is all about the discrediting the person's reputation. They don't discuss the argument, they don't discuss the point that you're making, but they discuss your character. And they try to dismiss you by saying, you're a right-wing fascist. We know you. You gave a speech for a right-wing party 7-9 years ago, so you should be one of them. You know what I mean? Those are all very dirty tactics that it used to hurt me at the beginning because I'm not a right-wing fascist. I know myself, and I know that everyone who is around me knows that I'm not. But now I don't give so much attention to this type of smears. You get to the point that you either go along with the mainstream accusations and you accept their definitions, what is right and what is left, what is far and what is not far, because they're setting the limits and they're setting the roof for discussion. They say this is the area where you can discuss your ideas. Beyond that, you're a far right radical extremist. No, I'm not going to comply with these definitions. At the beginning, yes, I was so scared and afraid for slanders and accusations. But now everybody can watch long format conversations. We're holding now, having a civilized conversation. If anyone can with of course, non-brainwashed person who watches this, he will notice that we are exchanging ideas, probably agree with us, probably doesn't agree, but we're adding to the literature of this discussion for the people to have different perspectives. Then they can watch other people, they can listen to other people and make up their minds. But silencing us for saying something different from the mainstream, this is the pure fascism. This is what this fascism is about, silencing other people's opinions, and then they project it on other people and they say, you are the fascist, although I'm not the one asking for them to be silent, right? They're the ones who want to silence us. Therefore, I see that democracy has become I don't even know that if it exists any longer in its classical sense now in Europe, especially now with what's happening in Romania. And it's very easy to say that this party, this politician is a threat to our democracy. He's spreading misinformation and disinformation. But if you are capable of presenting facts, then you can dismiss this person's arguments. You own the media, you own many of the social media platforms, so you're able to shape narrative. And if you are truthful, people will see the truth. But because you're not telling them the full truth and other people are filling this vacuum of the conversation and the discussion, then they will gain more popularity. And this will not end up well, Neil, because then there will be this clash, especially in Europe, with the people who believe in free speech and people who don't believe in free speech but pretending that they're championing free speech. And the people can see through. People can see through, and the examples are clear, like 20% of the people in Germany voted for AfD. And again, I say this because the AfD 10 years ago, they had 3%. So what happened? Are the people who are voting for AfD 20%, are they all fascists? Are they all neo-Nazis? Are you saying that 20% of the German people are neo-Nazis? Or do they have serious concerns? And they found in the AfD and other parties, probably also in Germany, showing them a path forward that we can solve these problems. There are serious problems in Germany that are solvable, but the current elites, they're not showing them any perspective. Or what is the strategy in these countries? Where is this country headed? What's about the gas? Like, okay, we're sitting here, we don't have Nord Stream pipelines. We're buying from third parties. We're buying from liquefied natural gas from the United States, 3 times more expensive than the Russian gas. So is this sustainable? No. So what is the strategy? There is no strategy. But the AfD comes and says, look, we have few options. We either continue on the same path and our country is deindustrialized and our companies are bankrupted, or we simply go back to buy Russian gas and make peace. But this is not allowed. That's why the war camp is so strong. They own the press and they're pushing against it.
But the labels across the board are becoming so meaningless, which in and of itself is dangerous because words matter and they have to have meaning. Once you erode the meaning, then they're just noises. And that if people who support or are chiming with some of the thinking of AfD in Germany, if they have to be labelled Nazis for that, there are real Nazis in Ukraine in the form of Azov Battalion and various other adherents, and yet apparently British soldiers, French soldiers, German soldiers should line up to stand alongside those forces in the name of democracy. The whole thing is it becomes utter. It's being made incomprehensible. It feels like chaos for the sake of chaos. But I think, obviously, why I got in touch with you this week, what we're looking at in Syria that I need to keep attention on for my own sanity is ethnic cleansing, at least, if not a genocide. And we know that there's a plausible genocide in Gaza. And you're back referencing to Armenian genocide. And here we are, 120 years after the Armenian genocide, after the genocidal activities in Germany in the middle of the 20th century. and we're watching genocide. And yet my government is sending money into that regime that is perpetrating a genocide. When does it make sense? It's anti-human.
Neil, I get emotional, but I don't want to be, because I don't want to influence people's emotions. But just think about it. Like 120 years ago, my grandparents came with barefoot to Syria. They escaped the genocide and they were received in Aleppo. They found shelter. So we came from a completely different place to another place. We started a new life from zero, basically. We had nothing with us and basically barefoot. And we found new roots, like we established new roots in this place. And 120 years later, a big lie, a sham has been sold to the people to believe that there is a democratic movement in Syria and they want to bring democracy and human rights, whereas we were telling them that this is not the case. And we were showing them evidence and proof for it. But they have pushed and pushed and pushed from their comfort zone, basically, from Washington or Brussels, and all these activists, and they call themselves liberal journalists in the UK and elsewhere, they pushed for this. They shaped the narrative, which led for a second uprooting of my family from our home. Like, why can't I go back to my country now, Syria? I was in Syria a few weeks before the regime change, right? Now, under free Syria, why can't I go to Syria? Why, if I go to Syria, I could get killed? If this is the free Syria, why can't my family go back to Syria? Because they are associated with me. That's why. So is this the free Syria? Is this what they wanted to establish and bring for the Syrian people? They have participated in shaping a narrative that is now committing genocide against the people. And these people want to come, who are non-Syrians basically, want to come and bash us, the Syrians, for speaking against it. This is like beyond absurd. I don't understand in what world do they live in to feel entitled to sit in London or in other places in Europe and tell us what we should accept and what type of governance. And when we speak about from a left-wing perspective, this is pure imperialism, thinking that you know better than us and you want to impose your utopia world on the rest of the world. No, we're different people there and we have different priorities in our lives. And if there is no security, there is no democracy. Is there any democratic state which is completely unstable and it's in chaos? No. You can't build a political system unless there is stability. It's 101 of any politics. Therefore, we called for first security, stability, so that we can build a political system that could be more democratic or more free and gives the people the rights. And no one in Syria under Assad liked political authority. Do you think someone who has a different opinion on Assad, like he doesn't want to express it? Of course. Like I myself, I studied political science and I'm a journalist. I would get benefit from having a free and democratic country. It benefits me. But at the same time, when I see the opposition to Assad, they are telling you that they don't want to create a democracy. Like when al-Julani occupied Idlib, they have raised a banner at the entrance of the city which says, democracy is against the rule of God. It says, women should stay in the kitchen. It says that women should cover themselves, even their fingernails. Like it's all written, they're telling you what they believe in. How can I come and say that these people will bring democracy? No, I prefer to preserve the minimum, which is security and stability and bread for the people, than destroying the entire country under a sham excuse that you're telling me this is democracy. So, okay, now al-Julani is in power. How is this democracy functioning? Like when we said that this insurgency was al-Qaeda-led insurgency, they said this is a conspiracy theory and this is an Assadist talking point. Then the leader of the al-Qaeda became the president of Syria. And then they changed his name. Like they're calling him Ahmad al-Sharaa now, and they're trying to whitewash him. And he's not only wearing a suit, he's also wearing a tie, which sends the message to Europe. Because remember, in Islamic countries, like in Iran or Saudi Arabia, they could wear a suit because the suit is not European, by the way. There are also roots from the Levant that suit also being exported to Europe, but the tie is definitely European. So he's sending messages to Europe or to the West that he's now this moderate and reformed leader, but his soldiers on the ground saying, we want to exterminate the Christians and the Alawites.
But it's that we live in the world that we do. That, you know, you and I are watching, only watching to some extent, the alternatives to the mainstream media that don't offer that traditional narrative. I mean, who could possibly think that Julani, by putting on a tie, is now
CNN,
it's now the leader of a democratic country? What audience? What audience? Although it's true, isn't it? The fact is that still too many people are ready to accept what they're being told, which is that now Syria is a democratic country, and we can all work together towards creating an inclusive democratic government in that.
This is the statement of the German government after the massacres. They said, we were shocked of the atrocities in Syria, and we called for an inclusive dialogue from all sides. It's like there is a gun over your head, and Annalena Baerbock is asking you for an inclusive dialogue with someone who's coming from Chechnya or Uzbekistan or from the Uyghurs. Like, sometimes I'm afraid to say things against this type of statements that would make I could end up in jail here, you know, because they say you insulted the minister or something because we don't have much of a fist fight here. But when you see these things, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling what they're trying to do. The EU blamed the victims. Germany said that we need inclusive dialogue. Only Marco Rubio condemned it and named it, said that this was an Islamist jihadist attack against the minorities, and he named 4 minorities in Syria. But they have a reason for it. Like, it's not like because they love us and in Syria, but they want for these 4 minorities in Syria to have their autonomous status. That's why he says we stand on the side of the Christians, the Alawites, the Kurds, and the Druze. These 4 components of the Syrian society. And this is the same goal of Israel, basically. Like, divide the country, balkanize them, make the minorities on your side. Like, before these massacres and during what was happening in Gaza and Lebanon, the vast majority of the Syrian people were shocked by the atrocities of Israel, and the sentiments against Israel was very, very high. Now that Julani is on a free spree of killing minorities, I spoke with countless people also here in Germany. We went to a demonstration, mostly from the Alawite community. They were telling me things like, even if Israel intervenes, we want to save our parents. But only a month ago or 2 months ago, they were all having serious negative sentiments against Israel. But now Julani created conditions in the country that whoever comes to save them, they will accept. I'm just telling you the truth, regardless of my opinion about it. People are telling me we're contacting Israeli officials on X. We're asking them to intervene. And then these Israeli officials are posting about it. They're saying they're receiving messages from Syrians saying that, please protect us. But I also would like to mention, your respected audience, that it was Israel who received these Julani's army in the Israeli Golan Heights hospitals and given them medical treatment and light weapons and cash money. And this is not my talk. The UN documented it. The Israeli former head of Mossad said it. The Israeli defense minister said it. And all the Israeli press, they say that Israel has given them tangible support to them. So they created or participated in creating the problem and then offering them the solution. So they're holding both sides and manipulating the people. But I'm not blaming someone who has a gun over his head, you know.
It's, on the one hand, it's so cynical. What you're describing, the cynicism is unbearable. And yet, And yet, on the other side, the traditional fable that we all kind of regurgitate at times like this about the emperor's new clothes, that the emperor gets tricked into appearing naked, but on the grounds that he's actually wearing a fantastic suit of clothes, and it takes one little boy to point out that he's just a naked man, and at that point, the audience, the crowd laughs. They realize what they're looking at. And yet, despite all of this cynicism, now when, the little boy points out that the emperor's not wearing any clothes, too many people just continue to see the suit of fabulous clothes. Even when the nakedness is... So that story has actually been turned inside out.
Yes.
Now when the little boy says the emperor's naked, the vast majority of the audience just continues to clap along at what a fantastic suit of clothes the emperor is wearing, to the extent that you begin to wonder, whose fault is it? Do we blame the cynics and the monsters, or do we have to take responsibility for ourselves as humanity and realise that we are watching genocide in this instance? We're watching at least ethnic cleansing, brutal, appalling atrocity of the lowest sort. And yet we're not seeing the naked emperor.
Neil, I learned this from a very humble experience in the past years. I think that the majority of the people live a very anxious life. And they have lots of tasks and duties and things to do in their life. They notice sometimes things are not wrong, things are not right. But only a minority which takes it upon its shoulder to speak against or speak up. And not all of these people are influential. So you have to make a career to become a professional pushbacker, let's say, and digging into every detail and understanding so that you can present to people. And despite that, many people see it. Many people notice that you're telling the truth about these things, but they don't have the privilege or the time to join the ranks, or many people are cowards. And many people, I receive comments from people telling me, we are with you and we know that you're telling the truth, but they're even afraid to put a like on my posts on Facebook, because if his name or her name appears on social media, they could lose their job, or they could come under social pressure, or somebody could come after them. So many people do not want to carry this burden, and I understand it. But now, when I went to a demonstration 3 days ago here in Berlin in front of the Turkish embassy, so many people joined the demonstration. All of a sudden, thousands of people came. But in the past 10 years, when I was telling the people, guys, if we don't mobilize and if we don't unite, this will going to happen. People were saying, we're living our lives and we're going to our works, but your parents are in Syria. What could happen if Julani wins? We have to push against this project, right? But now that the trouble came to their doorstep, now they're participating, because many people do not join the ranks until the pain and the suffering comes directly on their doorstep. And this is the unfortunate truth about it. Therefore, people like yourself is very important, having an influence, and be responsible. Having an influence and being irresponsible, it doesn't work. You have to really measure your words and even tell the people the words that they like to sometimes to hear, if it has a positive impact on them and encourages them. Many people never heard a word of encouragement in their life, that they can step up and have a voice, say no. Many people never said no in their lives. They never said no even in their family. You know what I mean? With their wives, with their children, with their family. So imagine saying no to power. A power that can destroy your life. They can smear you. They could call you names. You would be ashamed. The biggest fear of a man is to be publicly ashamed. Imagine if you have an army of influencers on X, like they're trying to do now, calling me a radical right wing. I'm a far right person. I do long format conversations and I'm not even close to the right, And despite that, they manage to slander people. So many people are worried. They don't people in Germany here, Syrians. We have 8,000 Syrian doctors. We have thousands of engineers. We have people working in car companies here, right? Engineers. These people are afraid. They could lose their job. Somebody could report them and say, this guy is an Assadist or this guy is a right wing, Because if you are against these massacres, apparently you could become a radical right wing.
I never really have been pro anyone or anything. If I'm pro anything, I just find it impossible to look on at, especially children, being slaughtered indiscriminately or with cruel intent. I don't care who they are. I don't care what colour they are, what faith they are or no faith, what their politics are. It's not, and I'm not pro any regime. I'm suspicious at best and downright cynical of all politicians and all regimes, and yet, like I've been called everything, whatever, Putin apologist, anti-Semitic, far-right extremist, and all of the rest of it. And as though I'm not really in favour of anyone. I just don't like looking on at children getting killed.
Yes. And look, Neil, when you watch these videos, if you have any humanity in you, even if you were against Assad, and there are so many people who were against Assad, and now they say, what is happening? Like, why are you guys killing all these civilians? And those are noble people, They pushed against Assad. They had good intentions, but now they see the outcome and they're like pushing against this outcome as well. Definitely there are people like that. But the trying to say, like, doing whataboutism or two-sidism, and those are Assad regime remnants, they are justifying killing of civilians. And whether it's a man or a woman or a child, like, how is it possible to open a door and just execute everyone? Because when he opened his eyes, his parents were Christians. It's like this little kid, he didn't even choose his religion. Do you think when I was baptized, somebody asked my opinion, like, do you want to be Christian? Now choose Orthodox or Catholic? No, nobody asked my opinion about it. He just put me in the water. Imagine there is someone coming to my doorstep now and asking me, are you Orthodox? You're not Catholic. We have to kill you. This is pure fascism. This is what the so-called liberals are defending in Syria at the current moment. They don't see themselves that they are enabling fascism. We really need to put a mirror in front of their faces to see the monster they have created in our country with their words and support and money and the media campaigns that they have done so that they enable this. So no, I reject to play their games and I reject to play with their words. Like, if you want to try to discredit my argument, have me on your show, let's discuss and let's argue, and there could be a moderator between us. But on social media, it's a yes or no answers, or, we have a photo with someone who is from a right-wing party in Europe. I mean, and so what? What happened with that? Like, I've been on BBC. Have I become a liberal? I've been on German public television, Deutsche Welle, which is funded by the German government, and it is a very liberal. I've been to all sorts of YouTube channels, I don't care, right, left, center, those things are irrelevant for me. I'm sending my message. I'm responsible for what I say, not responsible for what the person in picture is with me or in a screenshot that they take on social media platforms. It's ridiculous. Like, I have a responsibility for my words, and I know who I am, and I know that the people know who I am, and I know that I'm not a radical person. So weiter so, as we say in German. I will continue. They try to destroy, but it just don't work any longer. People can read these comments and see, what are they talking about? Like, this guy is just explaining geopolitics of these wars. Why are they calling him radical right, for example? And I come from a traditional left-wing family. We grew up on anti-imperialism. Like, we don't like this Western intervention in our country. We push against it actively, against these wars and interventions. But on social media, it's a different word nowadays. And even in traditional media, there are other different labels. So And I don't play these games with them. I'm very grateful that people like yourself exist who are open-minded and tolerant. Like this is the mutual ground that I find with people like yourself. Whatever they call you, I don't care, because I can see through. And when I speak with you, the words have energy. I feel if it's true or if it's not. And I can see also intentions. Like I'm someone who watches eyes, for example, when somebody is speaking, and I see if they are trying to be truthful with us. And when I watch on mainstream, for example, they have these frozen eyes. They're looking into this teleprompter. They're not showing you any for you to try to understand if they're telling you the truth or not. But we have a track record now to know. After so many lies and after so many lies that destroyed people's lives, from Iraq to Syria to Libya, millions of people were killed by this. Do you think those people didn't have soul or dreams or family? So they treat us like we're flies, And worse than that, because probably there are NGOs for the rights of the flies in Europe, but not for the rights of the people to have basically soul, now getting killed by a person who doesn't even know how to write and read, and never seen anything outside his bubble, which is this. They have been indoctrinating them for a long time, since the Afghanistan war, that this is the way forward. We have to kill everyone that is different from us. We have to establish this utopia, so-called Islamic State, like they did under ISIS. But who gave them the weapons? Who gave them the pickup trucks? Like, do you think in your country, if a foreign power comes and establishes joint military operation room on the borders of your country, and then funnels tens of billions worth of weapons into the hands of people, like something like this won't happen? Of course it will. So the foreign factors are very, very detrimental in this. If we had, let's say, radical people in Syria and they don't have weapons, they don't have training, there are no training camps for them, and all this money, it was impossible for them to emerge victorious. That's the truth. They enabled the radicals and they brought them to power. These foreign powers, they did it, and now they're responsible for what's happening in the country. That's why they don't want to take responsibility. And the European Union says those are Assad regime remnants. But you know who was truthful about the Syrian war? Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard told the truth about Syria. Tulsi Gabbard said that those are al-Qaeda elements who are being funded and supported by us, by the CIA. And that's why she received a big backlash. And they have tried to say she's some Assad pony or Assad darling. Why? Because she was in Syria and she met with the people and spoke to them, and the people were terrified by this ISIS and al-Nusra people. And she came back and she reported the truth about the Syrian conflict. Now that she is in Director of the National Intelligence, I truly hope that she would shape this the policy of Trump in Syria, because this is not a exclusive danger for Syria. These people are making the world in a more dangerous place, and these ideas travel. It's not like it's a physical thing. The ideas travel. It encourages people in different places in Europe, in the United States, to adopt this approach, because they see that in order to come to power, then you have to be part of this movement, part of these ideas, part of these military groups. They're encouraging people and and showing these groups as their fancy groups, their freedom fighters. They dress Julani many times like Che Guevara. Why? Those are all media PR teams working on it so that they show him like he is some sort of a revolutionary figure. They are encouraging many people in the Arab and Islamic world, unfortunately speaking, to see in Julani as some sort of an idol. Like, does this make the world a better place? No, for sure.
What a question to end on, Kevork, and what a way to answer it. To me, I can only speak for me. You sound to me like an honest, decent man, and you see what you see, and you tell other people what you've seen, and you can do no more. As always, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and we will talk again. Thank you, Kevork Almassian.
Thank you so much, Neil, for having me and for the opportunity. I just wanted to amplify the voices of the Syrian people now to your respected audience.